Adam Foster prided himself on being a skeptic. A renowned paranormal investigator, he had spent years debunking myths and exposing frauds. The thrill of uncovering the truth had taken him to some of the most infamous haunted locations in the world, but none of them had ever left him feeling genuinely unsettled. Until now. The Brookhaven Institute stood at the edge of a desolate stretch of land, its imposing silhouette framed by skeletal trees and an overcast sky. Locals had warned Adam against venturing there, their faces pale as they recounted tales of ghostly apparitions, maddening whispers, and people who entered the asylum only to vanish without a trace. To Adam, these were just stories, exaggerated over decades to scare children and attract thrill-seekers. But something about Brookhaven felt different. Its presence was oppressive, as though the building itself were watching him. "We'll be in and out," Adam reassured his crew as they stood before the rusted gates. There were 4 of them: Sarah, his tech-savvy assistant, Marcus, the cameraman, and Jenna, a psychic medium who had joined the team a year ago. Despite her talent for sensing energies, Jenna rarely spoke of her abilities, preferring to let her intuition guide the group silently. Tonight, however, she looked visibly uneasy. "This place isn't right," Jenna murmured, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't want us here." Adam ignored her, focusing instead on the equipment Marcus was setting up. Cameras, EVP recorders, and EMF detectors, the usual arsenal for a paranormal investigation. The crew followed him through the gates and up the crumbling steps, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The air grew colder as they entered the asylum, the heavy door groaning shut behind them like a final warning. The interior was a decaying labyrinth of peeling wallpaper, shattered glass, and rusted fixtures. The silence was deafening, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. As they moved deeper into the building, strange phenomena began almost immediately. Disembodied whispers drifted through the halls, faint but unmistakable. Doors creaked open and slammed shut without warning. Sarah's EMF detector spiked wildly, its lights flashing in rapid succession. "This is incredible," Adam said, his voice tinged with excitement. He had encountered similar activity in other locations, but never with such intensity. The asylum seemed alive, reacting to their every move. For Adam, this was irrefutable evidence of the paranormal. For Jenna, it was a harbinger of doom. As the night wore on, the activity grew more aggressive. Shadows darted across their peripheral vision, and objects moved on their own. In one room, Marcus captured a clear EVP of a voice saying, "Get out." Sarah's hands trembled as she replayed the recording. "It's like it knows we're here," she whispered. Adam's excitement was tempered by a growing unease. The voices were becoming more coherent, more deliberate. They spoke his name, taunting him with fragments of memories he had long buried. "You left her," one voice hissed, sending a chill down his spine. He dismissed it as a trick of the mind, but doubt began to creep in. How could the asylum know about his past? In the basement, they discovered a series of patient records hidden in a locked filing cabinet. The documents were yellowed with age, the ink faded but legible. They detailed a series of experiments conducted by Dr. Elias Grayson, the asylum's head physician. Grayson had been obsessed with curing mental illness, using unorthodox and often brutal methods. Lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and isolation chambers were standard practices. But the records hinted at something far darker: experiments designed to harness the energy of the human mind, to manipulate and control it. "These weren't treatments," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "They were rituals." The realization hit Adam like a punch to the gut. The asylum wasn't just haunted by the spirits of its former patients. It had been transformed into something far worse: a vessel for the horrors Grayson had unleashed. The building itself was alive, feeding on the pain and suffering of those who entered its walls. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though the asylum were aware of their discovery. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and a low hum reverberated through the walls. Jenna's face turned pale as she clutched her head, her eyes wide with terror. "It's trying to trap us," she gasped. "We have to leave. Now." But the asylum had other plans. As they retraced their steps, the layout of the building seemed to shift. Hallways stretched endlessly, doors led to nowhere, and familiar rooms disappeared entirely. The oppressive darkness closed in around them, and the whispers became a cacophony of voices, each more desperate and malicious than the last. Marcus was the first to vanish. One moment he was behind them, filming their frantic attempts to find an exit. The next, he was gone, his camera lying abandoned on the floor. The footage revealed nothing but static, punctuated by fleeting glimpses of a figure standing just out of frame. Panic set in as they realized the asylum was picking them off one by one. Sarah clung to Adam, her fear palpable, while Jenna's resolve began to crumble. "It's feeding on us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our fear, our pain, it's what keeps it alive." Adam refused to give up. He was determined to find Marcus, to find a way out. But as they pressed on, the asylum seemed to taunt him, dredging up memories he had fought to suppress. Visions of his estranged sister, of the guilt he carried for abandoning her, played out before him like a macabre theater. The voices whispered her name, accusing him, condemning him. He fell to his knees, the weight of his past threatening to crush him. Jenna's voice broke through the haze. "Adam, you have to fight it. It's using your guilt against you." Her words gave him the strength to rise, to push forward despite the terror that gripped his heart. In the heart of the asylum, they found the source of its power, a circular room with walls covered in intricate symbols. At its center stood an altar, its surface stained with dried blood. The whispers were deafening here, a chorus of agony that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Jenna's eyes widened as she recognized the symbols. "These are bindings," she said. "The rituals weren't just experiments. They were meant to trap the spirits here, to bind them to this place." Adam knew what they had to do. Using the knowledge from the patient records and Jenna's intuition, they performed a counter-ritual to break the bindings. The air crackled with energy as the symbols on the walls began to fade. The whispers turned to screams, and the room shook violently as the asylum fought to maintain its hold. Just as they completed the ritual, the floor beneath them gave way. Adam and Jenna plunged into darkness, landing in a hidden chamber beneath the asylum. There, they found Marcus, unconscious but alive, surrounded by the faintly glowing remnants of the shattered bindings. The asylum's grip was weakening, but they weren't free yet. With Marcus in tow, they navigated the collapsing structure, dodging falling debris and the grasping hands of shadowy figures. The building seemed to implode around them, its walls folding in like a closing fist. Finally, they burst through the front doors into the cold night air, gasping for breath. The asylum stood silent and dark behind them, its oppressive presence gone. But the scars it left would remain forever. Adam knew he had uncovered more than just a haunted building. Brookhaven had forced him to confront the darkest corners of his soul, and he would never be the same. As they drove away, Jenna turned to Adam. "What now?" she asked. Adam stared out the window, the weight of the experience heavy on his shoulders. "We tell the story," he said, "and we make sure no one ever goes back there." But even as he spoke, a faint whisper echoed in his mind, chilling and familiar. "Adam, it's not over." That whisper haunted him for days after they escaped. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the stress of the ordeal had left his mind playing tricks on him. But the echoes of Brookhaven followed him, slipping into his dreams, where he found himself wandering the asylum's halls once more. Each time, the shadows grew closer, their whispers sharper, accusing. He woke each night drenched in sweat, Jenna's words from that fateful night echoing in his ears. "It feeds on fear." Adam threw himself into work, poring over the footage they'd managed to recover. The recordings were corrupted, distorted by static and strange anomalies that made it impossible to discern what was real. But one thing stood out, brief flashes of a figure in the shadows, its eyes glowing faintly. It wasn't human. The realization filled Adam with dread, a creeping suspicion that they hadn't escaped Brookhaven's grip after all. Driven by a mix of curiosity and desperation, he returned to the patient records they had found. Hidden among the files was a journal belonging to Dr. Grayson. Its pages were filled with cryptic notes and sketches, detailing his experiments and the dark rituals he had performed. One entry caught Adam's attention. "The essence of the mind is powerful. It can bind, it can trap, and it can free. But the cost is steep. Once the bond is made, it cannot be undone without a sacrifice." The words chilled him. Had they broken the bindings, or had they simply shifted the asylum's curse onto themselves? Jenna's intuition had been right. Brookhaven wasn't just a building, it was an entity, and it wasn't done with them. The final confrontation came one stormy night, when the whispers grew too loud to ignore. Adam woke to find his house bathed in shadows that seemed to pulse with life. The air was thick, suffocating, and the whispers called his name, beckoning him. As he stumbled through the darkness, he found himself standing before a mirror, but it wasn't his reflection staring back at him. It was the asylum, its decaying walls and sinister symbols etched into the glass. Adam knew he couldn't run any longer. Brookhaven wanted him back, and this time, it wasn't going to let him go. Gathering the journal and the remnants of their equipment, he called Jenna. "It's happening again," he said, his voice trembling. "We need to finish this." Together, they prepared for one last journey into the unknown, knowing that this time, the stakes were higher. Brookhaven wasn't just a story to tell. It was a fight for their very souls.